All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're kicking things off with a bit of a historical mystery today. We're going to look at a pivotal moment in American history that connects a truly horrifying disaster directly to the workplace protections that you and I rely on every single day. We're going to see exactly how a desperate fight for physical survival transformed into this massive political movement. Picture this. It's the fall of 1912. Thousands of immigrant working women are marching through the streets of New York City. And among the banners they're carrying is this exact, highly specific, and honestly kind of surprising sign: "We want the vote for fire protection." It's a huge paradox, right? Think about it. What in the world does casting a ballot in an election have to do with escaping a burning building? Well, for these women, the two were completely inseparable. To understand why the right to vote was literally a matter of life and death, we have to look at the world they were living and working in. Which brings us to Section 1, the Triangle Factory Tragedy, March 25, 1911. To answer that question about voting and survival, we need to rewind exactly 1 year before that parade, to the harrowing events at the Ash Building in Manhattan. Even before the fire started, the day-to-day reality for these industrial workers was just bleak. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory took up the top 3 floors of the building, employing about 500 workers, mostly young Italian and Jewish immigrant women and girls. And the conditions were brutal. We're talking 9 to 12-hour workdays for a mere $7 to $12 a week. They literally had to supply their own needles and thread. But the absolute most dangerous part? Supervisors routinely locked the exit doors. They claimed it was to stop employee theft and keep union organizers out. So the reality is, these women were essentially locked inside a sweatshop. And that locked door? It became a horrific death sentence. It's a Saturday afternoon, the workday is wrapping up, and a fire sparks in a scrap bin on the 8th floor. The room is absolutely packed with highly flammable cotton scraps, so the fire spreads with terrifying speed. Workers rush for the exits only to find the door locked tight. Total panic sets in. The building's only exterior fire escape was flimsy, and it buckled and collapsed almost instantly under the weight of the fleeing workers. To make matters worse, when the fire department showed up, their horse-drawn ladders only reached the 7th floor. The workers above that were completely trapped. 146. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is how many garment workers perished in just a matter of minutes. 123 women and girls and 23 men. The youngest victims were just 14 years old. It remains the deadliest industrial disaster in New York City's history. The grief and outrage in the city were off the charts. Labor organizer Rose Schneiderman completely nailed the sentiment of the working class at the time, pointing out that industrial greed treated human life as totally disposable. And get this, the factory owners were actually tried for manslaughter, but they were acquitted. The city's fire codes were so incredibly weak that the owners technically hadn't broken any mandatory standards. That leads us into Section 2, Powerless in the Workplace and the Political Epiphany. The trauma of the fire, combined with the fact that the factory owners walked away scot-free, triggered a massive systemic wake-up call for working-class women. And the core of that wake-up call was devastatingly simple. Without political influence, they were entirely at the mercy of negligent employers. Striking for better wages didn't mean a thing if a locked door could still kill you. They realized they needed laws, and to get laws, they absolutely needed the vote. So we see this incredible pivot in their strategy. Before the fire, female workers often relied on male union bosses or wealthy middle-class reformers for protection. But after the fire, that completely flipped. Relying on others was no longer an option. They transformed from victims into fierce political activists, realizing the ballot was literally their only weapon to force protective labor legislation. Rose Schneiderman saw the writing on the wall. She knew that economic organization, like simply forming a union, was pretty much useless without the political freedom to enforce safety on the shop floor. These women decided they couldn't just wait around for politicians to magically start caring about them. They had to force them to care by becoming voters themselves. Moving on to Section 3, the fight for the vote, mobilizing for survival. For these women, the suffrage movement was definitely not just about abstract concepts of equality. It was about literal, physical survival. Enter the Wage Earners Suffrage League. Labor organizers like Leonora O'Reilly set this up to make sure the voices of actual factory workers were leading the charge, bypassing the sometimes condescending attitudes of wealthy suffragists.
They basically became the militant, labor-focused wing of the whole movement. And the momentum here is just wild. By some eerie coincidence, the Wage Earners Suffrage League was founded just 3 days before the Triangle Fire. The tragedy poured absolute fuel onto their fire. By April, Schneiderman is delivering blistering speeches demanding industrial democracy. And by the fall of 1912, as we saw at the start of this explainer, these immigrant women were marching in the streets, holding signs demanding the vote for fire protection. They brilliantly tied the horror of the burning factory straight to the denial of their democratic rights.
And guess what? Their relentless pressure actually worked. The massive public outcry forced New York State to create the Factory Investigating Commission. This group went in, saw the horrors firsthand, and pushed through over 30 groundbreaking labor laws. We are talking mandatory automatic sprinklers, outward opening unlocked doors, and strict limits on working hours. They effectively started dismantling the sweatshop trap.
But the impact didn't stop in New York. A young social worker named Frances Perkins actually watched the Triangle Fire happen from the street. That horror stuck with her for the rest of her life. Decades later, she becomes the first female U.S. Secretary of Labor under FDR. She took the reforms fought for by those factory women and championed them on a national scale during the New Deal, laying the groundwork for the Fair Labor Standards Act.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about this. How many of the safety regulations you completely take for granted today were built on the political struggles of women who once had zero voice? Next time you walk into a building and see an illuminated exit sign or a fire sprinkler, remember exactly where they came from. Your safety at work today is a direct inheritance from those 146 victims, and from the women who turned profound grief into a political revolution. They realized that to protect their lives, they first had to claim their voice. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.